girl with a preppy vibe came to the spot with a friend of mine. She caught my eye. From the beginning, I was hooked, I can't tell a lie. Fresh, dressed, and fly, I respect her mind. Some dude trying to impress, but looking goofy at the same time. He bugging, she looking, I'm going for mine. Confidently, I approach for that eye-to-eye contact. She smiling while adjusting her hair, so I smile back. Pretty girl, what's your name? She said, is that true? Cause if it is, your name perfect for you. My name handsome. She said your name fits you too. See, we was clicking, and after that, time just flew. Then that time came to talk to her pops. He gave his blessing. And then that mind frame I had was honoring and protecting. I knew she was the woman we met. I found my future girl, and no other woman compares to my girl.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Steph Fashionista. Welcome to the check-in. So y'all, a lot has happened. I know I say that every live stream, but a lot has happened, y'all. As we mentioned yesterday, Iran stated, hey, since you guys, attacked our oil fields, we're gonna come for you guys. Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, and they did just that. Okay, we're gonna get into that. Also, we have a little bit of more information regarding Joe Kent and him saying there was an imminent threat. He has doubled down on what he was saying. Additionally, we have some Operation Epic Fury updates. We have a little bit of commentary regarding Rand Paul and Markwayne Mullin. That's an interesting name, okay? Also, some updates regarding Pam Bondi and the Epstein case. And yes, Trump and his Pearl Harbor comments today with the Japanese Prime Minister. So we have a full schedule of activities going on, lots of topics, and we're going to go ahead and get into it. So as I mentioned with Iran, they ended up hitting, they were true to their word. They did attack their neighbors' energy operations, okay? And it's crazy. So they were able to counterattack some of the missiles, but not all. And yes, I just saw a video from Netanyahu where he was saying that number one, he said he's alive. Number two, he said that they acted alone, that the U.S. was not included, they were not involved, and that they agreed to not do any additional attacks, at this time. And he says that he cannot tell President Trump what to do. He reiterated that. Okay. What we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go ahead and see this first video, which shows what happened last night in regards to the neighboring countries and their energy sources. Let's get into it.
First, we go to Trey Yanks, who is live on the ground in Tel Aviv with the very latest on the Iran war. Hi, Trey.
Yeah, Todd, Carly, good morning. Just a few minutes ago, the Iranians launched another barrage of ballistic missiles at Tel Aviv. We watched here as Israel's air defense systems worked to shoot down the incoming fire. We're tracking developments, though, out of Iran after yesterday the Israelis launched a series of airstrikes against facilities linked to Iran's South Pars gas field. And this is a field that is also connected to a Qatari field. And immediately, the Iranians responded with strikes against that facility, the Ras Laffan industrial city in Qatar. This is the largest liquefied natural gas export facility in the world. And according to officials there on the ground, as of 7 hours ago, 2 out of the 3 fires caused by these blasts were controlled, but that severe damage was reported at this critical natural gas facility. Now, President Trump took to Truth Social to say, quote, Israel, out of anger for what has taken place in the Middle East, has violently lashed out at a major facility known as South Pars gas field in Iran. He went on to say there will be no further attacks against this facility, but it does raise major questions about the escalation ladder in this conflict. It comes as Iran launched more attacks against Israel overnight. Sirens were sounding across the center part of this country. Interceptions taking place overhead. You can see here some of the incoming fire over the skies of Israel. And we also know that overnight, at least 4 people were killed, 3 in the West Bank, Palestinian women who were at a salon, and 1 person killed in the central part of this country. A spokesperson for the Israeli military spoke about the air defense systems that are currently in play to shoot down the incoming fire.
We have air defense systems. I can already say they are among the best in the world.
this is proven. Unfortunately, the defense is not airtight. We use our systems to intercept these missiles. These cluster missiles are a war crime if this terrorist regime targets them at population centers. There is no difference from a regular missile except for its dispersion.
Okay.
We watched last night as some of those cluster munitions rained down on central Israel. Earlier this week, some debris from an Iranian missile landed near to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. All of Jerusalem's holy sites are currently closed amid this conflict. And also,
there has been so much reporting regarding Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and the latest is from an Israeli national security source who told Fox News, describing him as an empty entity who is not at the helm of the regime, but maybe even more importantly, this person goes on to say the current Iranian regime is broken, confused, and almost misfunctioning. You know, it has been the goal of Israel and the U.S. for the Iranian people to topple this regime themselves. And it does feel like these are the conditions that could allow for that to happen.
Let me stop
Absolutely.
for a second. So I'll just give you my take. So one, they were saying that the new supreme leader, like he may be, severely injured because we haven't seen him since he has taken power. He did a message last week and someone read it for him, okay? And so they were saying that the gentleman that was on a live yesterday, I want to say it was the Ali Larijani. They were saying that he was kind of at the helm of things in the interim, right? And so he's gone along with Ismail Khatib and Ghalam Reza Salamani. So those were the three additional leaders who were taken out in addition to the Ayatollah, right? So it seems like to me, I'm not any type of war expert, but they seem to have a pipeline of individuals that can step in and take over the helm of what they have going on over there from the Iran perspective, right? So not sure what they are seeing, but I mean their oil field got hit yesterday and they put a note and said, hey, we're giving you guys a few hours, get the your people to leave from over there because we are going to attack these 5 places within the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, and they did just that, okay? And so we're seeing the aftermath of that, okay? So let's continue with the commentary.
There are framing operations underway to lay the groundwork if civilians want to go to the streets of Iran once again. Ali Larijani, a top official, was taken out earlier this week, a besieged force commander, the man responsible for ordering the crackdown on protesters earlier this year. And then just yesterday, Iran's intelligence minister confirmed killed in Israeli strikes. And so all of this is taking place in an effort to lay that foundation. But we should note here that the Iranian regime still has the ability to fight in this conflict, and they are threatening not only Israel, but also Gulf countries with this ballistic missile fire and trying to choke off the global energy supply. And so while their leadership structure has been decimated, they have the ability to fill the shoes of these individuals. And they say they will continue to launch attacks against U.S. forces and allies across the Middle East.
So yesterday we were talking about the term decimated, and I think when they use it just now, they use it correctly because, as we learned, decimate means where you take out a significant amount, but the whole thing. So in the case of the Iranian leadership, they have removed like the top 4 that I'm hearing, but they still have others in the pipeline. So I think decimate is used correctly in this particular scenario, but maybe not yesterday. I forgot what he was talking about. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about Trump's response to what happened at the oil fields yesterday. And he is saying that he was not in support of what was done by Israel. And so we're going to hear exactly what he had to say on that topic.
And a rare rebuke of Israel from the US president. Donald Trump says he knew nothing about Israeli attacks on Iran's South Pars gas field, the largest in the world. The president posted on social media, no more attack will be made by Israel on the area unless Tehran retaliates against Qatar, which of course shares the gas field with Iran. Oil and gas facilities came under attack from Iran on Wednesday, including sites in Qatar, the UAE, and Kuwait. Saudi Arabia says it intercepted 4 missiles over Riyadh as foreign ministers from the region met in the capital. CNN's Oren Lieberman joining us now from Jerusalem. And Oren, I want to learn more, if we can, about what happened with the Israeli attack on the Iranian part of the South Pars gas field. What do we know? What do we understand? We've certainly heard from the US president. Anything from the Israeli side?
Becky, before we saw President Donald Trump's response, we had heard from 2 Israeli officials that the attack was coordinated with the United States. And that, of course, is no surprise. Since the very first opening strikes nearly 3 weeks ago now, Israel and the U.S. have been coordinated on nearly every aspect of this. And that's not only a testament to the relationship between the U.S. and Israel at the political and military levels, it's also simply necessary to carry out these attacks with so many moving parts in the air, and in the sea all at once. So Israeli officials say the attack on the South Pars gas field was coordinated with the U.S., and it was intentionally targeted at gas and electricity infrastructure, not at oil infrastructure, to insulate the attacks and the price of fuel in the United States from Israel's ongoing attacks. Of course, that didn't work when Iran lashed out and attacked gas and oil infrastructure around the region. But everything we have heard from the Israelis, and we heard it again from a foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night on Jake Tapper's show, is that all of this has been coordinated with the U.S. And we've heard that from the U.S. side as well, both political and military. So, Becky, at this point, I think it's very difficult to believe Trump's claim that the U.S. and he knew nothing about the attack on the South Pars gas field because of the coordination we have seen to this very point. The idea that 3 weeks into a war that Israel wants to continue, that Israel would just simply go rogue and carry out attacks that are not coordinated with the U.S. is incredibly hard to believe right now.
What else do we know about the long list of targets that we understand Israel has at this point? They were, it seems, targeted at individuals and groups inside of Iran. I'm just wondering whether this long list includes other installations outside of Tehran and the sort of, the neighborhoods.
That answer is almost certainly. They're not going to give us a target list of what's remaining just yet, but we have seen them expand where they are striking. Yesterday, they acknowledged striking on Iran's northern border. Their first strikes, they say, in northern Iran. Israeli officials tell us they hit Iranian naval assets in the Caspian Sea, which is, again, the first time we've seen that since the war. There are also almost certainly more targeted killings that Israel is planning to carry out, including against Mujtaba Khamenei and others. So that list certainly has more targets on it, Becky, as the war continues.
So what do you make of this apparent split between the U.S. and Israel, with President Trump in a rare rebuke of Israel saying the U.S. knew nothing about the strike on a key Iranian gas field after Iranian state media blamed both the U.S. and Israel, and President Trump calling on Israel to end all strikes on energy targets?
Now, my thinking about that is that President Trump has made a political analysis, and that is that the greatest vulnerability we in the United States, and especially the world, as your previous commentators have made mention, is vulnerability in the energy sector. So that particular political pressure, both domestic and foreign, is felt by President Trump. And what he saw was an attack, perhaps, we don't know this for certain, but certainly initiated by Israel. Whether or not Israel had any previous approval or at least giving alerts to the United States, doubtful, nobody knows. But that hit energy. And if there is anything that President Trump does not want to happen, that is a political downslide as a result of an uproar both in the United States and around the world about the desperate circumstances that are resulting from the, quite frankly, the embargo of fossil fuels, natural gas, petroleum, bottled up down there at the Straits of Hormuz.
Could this signal the U.S. stepping back a little bit here?
I doubt that.
I am an optimistic person, so perhaps again, I'm not one of these who have, optimism hasn't pushed me to the point in which I would embrace the expectation that this war will end in another week to 2 weeks. And that's because we use an expression in the military, the enemy has a vote. And what that means, quite simply, is we can have all the best plans in the world. We can establish our objectives, limited or broader, but we are in a conflict with a regime that has a long history grounded in religious fanaticism. It is not so simple to encourage the Iranian leadership to abandon what, from its perspective, is an existential conflict, meaning Iran, from the date of its formation in 1979, has dedicated itself to self-preservation and directly, and has expressed very clearly, destruction of Israel and the implementation or imposition of huge pain on the United States. I don't see the Iranians necessarily backing down, regardless of what President Trump has done vis-a-vis Israel and the bombing of the South Paws oil fields.
So what about boots on the ground? A U.S. military ship with almost 2,500 military personnel on board is heading to the region. And according to Reuters, the Trump administration is considering sending thousands more. Now, we don't know exactly what they'll be doing, but there is talk of them getting troops to extract Iran's enriched uranium or possibly sending them to Karg Island. How risky would these ground operations be?
The first way to answer that question is to incorporate what you have described as two objectives of U.S. land forces. One is securing the uranium that is buried across Iran, locations not necessarily well known. That is a very difficult task because you're putting American soldiers in harm's way deep inside the country, and that becomes a real fight on the ground. The second use of American soldiers, at least from my perspective, is to establish some sort of enclave around the Straits of Hormuz. That is the area of vulnerability. That particular geographic location and the utilization of that location by the Iranians, has caused what we see of the great pain now suffered around the world. So you get ground troops and you establish a beachhead around the Straits of Hormuz for the purpose of, one, locating additional ground to ship weapons, as well as Iranian forces, naval assets that constitute the threat to shipping. So there are two, as you've recited, two potential locations for the imposition of U.S. forces, both extremely dangerous. We don't know what will happen.
Right. Retired Major General Mark McCarley, thank you so much.
Okay, he's a retired general. Okay, he brought up some good points. So what did you all think about what he said? Now we have Mohammed Jazz 9753 in the chat here. Welcome to the check-in. And he says, do not believe what Mr. Trump says. Don't consider him fit to be the president of USA. Okay. Then we have Hassan Nori 5301. Welcome to the check-in. Saying American people are living homeless, hunger, begging each other for food. American taxpayer money is using Israeli military weapons against. Okay. All right. So next up, we talked about yesterday Joe Kent and how he's resigned from his position. One of the top, and he was one of the top people in intelligence, right? Working for Trump. He resigned and stated that there was no imminent threat. Okay. And so he's doubling down on that. He did a interview recently, I guess yesterday, where he is standing on business regarding that. So let's go ahead and check that out.
Was Iran on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon?
No, they weren't, 3 weeks ago when this started, and they weren't in June either.
The president's former top counterterror official is doubling down on claims he made in his resignation letter yesterday, where he argued Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. Now the administration disputes what Joe Kent is alleging. But as for who had the president's ear before the war began, Kent has said some voices within the administration were shut out from the decision making.
A good deal of key decision makers were not allowed to come express their opinion to the president. There was robust debate and robust discussions leading up to the 12-day war into Midnight Hammer. But this second round, to me, and I'm sure others will refute this and disagree with me, but what was conducted by just a handful of small of advisors around the president.
Joining me now, former advisor to Vice President Mike Pence and Homeland Security advisor during Trump's first term, Olivia.
So he just said that certain people were not allowed to be, I guess, in the discussion rooms when they were coming with these key decisions regarding these war tactics. And I would think that if you're like the top of in the intelligence realm, like you're the person, like why would you not have been included in that? But I guess we'll see what the next person has. I think she said she was a part of Trump's organization on the first term, but ended up resigning as well. Let's get into this.
She also worked at the National Counterterrorism Center. Also here, former senior communications aide Lindsey Graham and Mike Pompeo, T.W. Origi. Glad to have both of you here. I'll begin with you, Olivia, because you resigned from the first Trump administration. And I wonder if you're surprised by Kent's comments that key decision makers, that's his phrase, could not voice their opinions to Trump.
I found that interesting. I think, to me, this is kind of classic Trump circles, the way it works when you're making important decisions. Sometimes people are in the room, sometimes get excluded out of the room, depending on who's pushing what viewpoint. And what opinion or fallout, viewpoint they want. So to hear someone like that say that on who wasn't in the room when you're making such a critically important decision on whether you're going to engage in conflict, global conflict, to me, that's appalling, because you would think that you would want all the voices in the room to really debate such an issue and inform the president on all of the options and the repercussions of certain actions that you're going to take.
That's the point of a cabinet. Whether he takes the advice is a different story as commander-in-chief. But I want to play more of what Kent is claiming about whether this indeed was an imminent threat. Listen.
There was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians, they're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder. And again, they're only deliberate under President Trump's leadership because they knew and they took President Trump very, very seriously.
Do you see this as his claims directly undermining what the administration has said?
I don't know. Look, Joe Kent is a combat veteran. He has earned the right to speak freely, and he can resign if he wants. That is fine. But as the previous guest pointed out, the Iranian threat has always been imminent. They act on it all the time. And I'm not really sure in the phraseology. This is, by the way, a gentleman who advocated for taking out their nuclear sites and their missile depots, who advocated this when he was running for office. But I quarrel with the idea of what does an imminent nuclear threat look like? Are we waiting for the bomb to be on the launcher before we decide to take action? The fact of the matter is Steve Witkoff was told directly by the Iranians that they had 1,000 pounds or more, 400-something kilograms of enriched uranium that were a hint away from being able to be put on a weapon, and that they had the inalienable right to enrich uranium. So the fact of the matter is this is a president who has made decisive action to bring Iran to its weakest point, to disrupt its proxies, to bring the Gulf states into a coalition with the Abraham Accords, and to bring the Middle East to a new chapter. This was absolutely the right time to act, and I'm sort of surprised that Joe Kent doesn't have the foresight to see that.
And yet, according to that lie, every single day of the Trump administration would have been a day that he could have proclaimed imminence. Even after last year, we were told that it had been obliterated in terms of the ability to have, at least in the short term, to have that nuclear capability. But this idea of having dissenting voices or who could provide alternate information, I mean alternate facts, I mean information of the intelligence community. Olivia, I mean, Trump has been quick to dismiss him, saying that he wasn't smart, he wasn't savvy, for not believing that Iran posed a threat. But you'll notice that Kent has been very careful to avoid personally attacking Trump, which I found interesting. Listen.
I think we departed personally on good terms. Again, I'm an adult. I understand the way I left and writing the letter, that there's parts of his administration that are going to have to come after me and try and discredit me. I understand that. But I think the president is someone who listens.
Yet he's just talking about people were not comfortable talking to him about this. I mean, this is something that I think you have a very unique perspective in terms of somebody who has voiced and been vocal about things you disagree with in an administration like this. How do you think the MAGA world will see him in this interview?
Well, I think it's part of serving in the Trump administration. When you have an opposing view and you're worried about voicing it because you're going to be shown the door. I mean, we saw Tulsi Gabbard today, and she purposely skipped over parts of her testimony because she's walking a fine line now. Now she has someone that actually is her direct report, right? In the same building, by the way, NCTC exists with GNI, reporting to her saying there was no imminent threat. And she's trying to figure out how she's going to navigate that dynamic when she's handling the president as the head of the intelligence community. So I also thought it was odd that she would take the line of oh, it's up to the president to decide that imminent threat. I'm like, no, it is your job, Tulsi. It is your job. And so I think one question that I have here in this whole situation is the top counterterrorism official in the Trump administration has just left his slot. That slot is vacant now to the president to decide that imminent threat. I'm like, no, it is your job, Tulsi. It is your job. And so I think one question that I have here in this whole situation is the top counterterrorism official in the Trump administration has just left his slot. That slot is vacant now while we are under severe threat from counterterrorism because of Iran. Here domestically, we're seeing it overseas. Americans are under threat overseas because of the actions of this administration that they've decided to take. And so now we have a void in this slot. So I think, while Joe Kent, look, I believe he was unqualified for the position.
What's his motivation here, you think?
So that's what I'm trying to figure out with him. Like, why this moment to speak out other than, okay, two things can be true, right? He's an extremist and qualified for the job, but also it can also be true that there was no imminent threat and he disagrees and felt like he wanted to come out and make this point of view made, like, publicly.
You already hear about cracks within MAGA. You heard someone yesterday saying that MAGA was dead, that the idea of Trump's America First strategy is not in line with his actions taken in this war. And you see this being vocalized. To look ahead for me as a strategist to the midterms and how this plays out, what do you see for Republicans?
Well, 80-something% of Republicans agree with the president's actions. So I think this MAGA thing is completely overblown. Yes, of course, you have the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, and now the Joe Kents who speak out against any intervention in any country, regardless of the threat they pose. That's always going to exist. But the fact that the idea that it's widespread is completely overblown. Look, this is clearly a different administration in terms of their foreign policy viewpoints than the first time around. And heavy is the head that wears the presidency. And the president needs to, just like Jefferson before him and all preceding presidents, have to take the advice of everybody around them, but then finally come to a decision. Jefferson himself, he didn't want a standing army. Next thing you know, we're outfitting ships for Africa. The fact of the matter is, every president takes the incoming information and makes a decision they feel are best. Donald Trump does not want to be another one of the presidents who kicks the Iranian can down the road and believes that we can do it quickly. And what you're seeing in the Straits of Hormuz, what you're seeing with the attacks on their Gulf state partners, this is a telltale sign that I'm sure all the intelligence knew signaled the last throes of this regime. And he wants to make sure that he puts this to bed sooner than later.
Wow. We'll see if the American public agrees. If you got to go back to Jefferson for a comparison,
It's been happening.
I don't know. I mean,
our entire
been a lot of
history.
presidents since Jefferson, but
They've all battled with it.
I love the historical reference. I just think maybe a quicker one would be good. Olivia at TW, thank you both.
Mike, I have to come to you because you know what it's like to leave the Trump administration.
Yes,
Okay,
I do.
not an easy decision.
It's
but
not an easy decision to leave any administration.
yes, that's fair. One of the things I noticed between Trump 1 and Trump 2 is that back in the first term, Trump was saying, hey, my intelligence officials are wrong on Iran. They should go back to school. I don't know if anyone remembers way back when him sort of saying this publicly. He didn't agree with them. Is it a surprise that they are, again, the people who are intelligence aren't in the room or don't have his ear?
I actually am, what surprises me and what was my experience is that Trump loves the debate. So to hear Joe Kent say these people weren't in the room,
that there was no
I
debate.
just don't buy it.
He's saying
I don't buy that
that dissenting opinions were not allowed in the room.
I don't buy that. Okay. I actually think that is most likely not true. That is not my experience. Now, does Trump decide to go his own way? Yeah, absolutely. But not having people in the room, I mean, this guy would, any random person walking into the room, the president would ask the most detailed, like, hey, what do you think about invading Iran?
Okay.
I mean, literally people that had no business giving him an answer, he would ask that question. So this Joe Kent stuff, it doesn't ring true to my ears.
Also, if this guy had a real problem, he should be talking to Congress, not on Tucker Carlson's show, spilling the state secrets here.
Yes.
So, I mean, he is known to be a conspiracy theorist who travels in conspiracy theories. So it's not saying what he's saying is not true. It should be investigated, but Congress should be the ones looking into that and asking these questions.
Can I ask about that? Because Democrats are kind of embracing it or trying to pull like a broken clock situation. Like, I don't like this guy, but. And I saw Senator Mitch McConnell in a social media post basically saying that Kent's resignation reflected virulent anti-Semitism, and that he talks about him being a guy who traffics in baseless and incendiary conspiracies, and don't believe this guy is some truth teller. That's from Mitch McConnell. So what do Democrats do with this information that they want to use, that they want to talk about, but it comes from, let's call a flawed messenger?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is a flawed messenger, but that's why you bring him up to Congress and you ask him questions there. And
under oath.
And under oath, and they ask these questions there. But the fact that the podcast bros and all these other people online are platforming this person who is a known conspiracy theorist and anti-Semite, you don't give him a platform. You ask him questions under oath and you ask what he knows. But you don't take what he says on Tucker Carlson and then do it in truth. And that's why people think the Democrats have Trump derangement syndrome, because they just grasp onto anything that disagrees and adds to their messaging. And that's not the way this works. What he's saying could absolutely be true, but we don't know that. And he is a very flawed messenger.
Here's my very detailed analysis of this.
Oh boy.
What she said.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have we have 738 Polar Bear. Welcome to the check-in, saying, how does he know anything? Who is he? Help me understand. Who is he? We have Michael Haddad. Welcome to the check-in, saying a sneak attack after being attacked. Shameless. Laugh out loud. Okay. What are we referencing with that? Get me up to speed, y'all. We had a couple of polls that we did. One was, do you think Trump was not aware of the Israel attack on the Iranian oil field? 67% said, of course he knew. 21% said no. 12% said, not sure. Okay. And then we have another poll that says, do you think Kent wasn't allowed to be in those key discussions where intelligence was needed? 68% said yes. 18% said no. 14%, he's making it up. So I think what the gentleman said made a little bit of sense. I don't know Trump, of course, but he does seem to like a good debate. So I kind of could see his point with that, as far as like, hey, wanting to have people in the room to at least debate with nothing else. But yes, y'all, that's what Kent had to say, as far as, hey, he wasn't allowed to be in those rooms, things of that nature. And now we're going to go into this clip about how is imminent threat determined, okay? What is it, okay? Someone asked about that yesterday in yesterday's live stream. Like, who determines that? Now, as you guys may know by now, Ms. Gabbard, she said that Trump decides that, and that apparently, the intelligence community provides information to him, and he decides if it's an imminent threat or not. So that was interesting perspective. Other people think differently, but let's go ahead and get into that discussion, y'all.
Director of National Intelligence to determine what is and what is not an imminent threat to the United States. She says no. Listen.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
Seems like a fair question to ask. I mean, is the president supposed to come up with this information about what's an imminent threat based off of just out of thin air, based off of his imagination?
No, what he feels in his mind.
Or in what he feels in his gut? Or is it her job to tell him, Mr. President, here are what the threats are, here are how urgent these threats are, okay? And urgent is another way of describing what imminent might mean.
Well,
imminent is a
different
type of urgency, right?
Yes.
And then the president decides what's actionable. So to Andrew McCabe's point, I mean, is it just that Trump just gets to decide based on his gut? That's a threat. In which case, what are we in a world of fact or in a world of feeling?
We're in a world of fact. I think Andrew McCabe's characterization of her answer goes very far from what she actually said. The question of whether or not something is imminent to the point where you're going to order military strikes is separate, and is the sole decision maker there is the president. It's based on the intelligence that they're getting. And Tulsi Gabbard's point was, we present the probabilities of what is a potential threat, and the president gets to decide with counsel whether or not he believes that it qualifies as imminent. To the point of what imminent means, it's not the same as what we all use this term. It started with the Bush doctrine, and it expanded greatly under Obama. And they're basically arguing three main points, I think, for what imminent threat actually can be in this role. Whether or not you have a window of opportunity, and they had obviously a window of opportunity in this case. Most of the people in Iran leadership are no longer alive. The ability to go after someone who is in fact, or an organization, a regime, is a potential threat. Do they have the capabilities to threaten us? And the argument from the beginning wasn't solely about tomorrow they can have nuclear capabilities. It was whether or not they were going to have the ballistic missile coverage to ensure that they can, in fact, cover their nuclear capabilities.
Can I just say, we're talking about this is a lot of mission creep here, and also moving of the goalposts, because neither of those things that you pointed out deal with the imminence of the threat itself. Do they have the capabilities? That's
what imminence is in this context.
Let's talk about the main thing. Do they have the capabilities? Okay, let me play what Tulsi Gabbard said about her written testimony on that front. Does Iran have the capability to rebuild its nuclear program? Here's what she said.
In your printed testimony today on page 6, and your last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There's been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president had said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
No, sir, I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions.
In the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
Okay, so it's as plain as day. They destroyed their nuclear capabilities last year. They told us it was obliterated. She just confirmed they had made no efforts to reconstitute that program. How is that not significant?
It is hugely significant, and for her to say that she skipped that part because she was running long, there were other parts she could have skipped. That is a very crucial part. I'm a journalist and a former magazine editor. That's the lead. You lead with that. That's not what you leave out in the cutting room floor. So people are playing a little fast and loose here. That the fact that our own intelligence assessment said that the Iranians had indeed their nuclear program had indeed been obliterated, and that they were not rebuilding that capacity is crucial, because we started one of the crucial explanations from the Trump administration was that they were building back their nuclear threat, and that they were using their missile threat to protect their nuclear program. If the nuclear program doesn't exist, then this is a whole different argument. The administration has to present a very different case for the war, and they haven't done it.
And when then why did Iran tell our diplomats last month that they had the capability to produce 11?
Did they?
Did they?
They have not.
Did they?
They have not disputed the characterization.
That's a serious question. Did they say that or not? The only person who said that is one person, Steve Witkoff, who is not, by the way, in a Senate-confirmed position. He is not accountable to anyone but the president. The DNI was just there, okay? She never said that ever. And in fact, she said quite the opposite, that they had not rebuilt. They had not made any attempts to rebuild, that they were not in a position to have done it. So I think it's worth questioning, is that actually a true assessment of where Iran was as it relates to their nuclear capabilities?
Don't you think Iran would be walking back, saying, as hell rains upon their country, I mean, what's going on here?
They have done. They've said over and over again, we are not building nukes. We only have Steve Witkoff's word. And by the way,
they were at the negotiating table, they say.
Threatening, making those kinds of threats is not atypical of a smaller power in a contest like this.
But you believe them when they say that the
smaller dog has to bark
Let me just
louder.
offer
But do you
this.
believe that?
Let me offer this. We are talking about. We're talking about Tulsi Gabbard as if she was a normal and qualified DNI. It was reported just a few months ago that she was on very thin ice with Trump. That's probably why she showed up in costume in Fulton County, Georgia, to try to buy herself a few more months and curry his favor. I am willing to bet a pair of Florsheim shoes, as somebody that has known Marco Rubio my entire adult life, that there is no way that Tulsi Gabbard is trusted by Trump or his inner circle, or that she is part of any decision making. It is scary to me that at a moment when we are in war, the person who is the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, is this woman who is not trusted even by people inside the White House. This is the same woman who, before she was appointed to this role, had a website where she was literally selling T-shirts that read, "No war with Iran." So if you think she was part of this decision and is in a position to give intelligence briefings to Donald Trump, I have a bridge to sell you somewhere. I think what is happening right now.
Let me say this. So I think it's interesting that because someone just said in the chat, I forgot who it was. Let me see if I can find the name real quick. But they were saying that maybe Trump just didn't. Yeah, it was Brad Landry. Maybe Trump didn't trust the ones he left out, no leaks, and they pretty much just proved your point or reiterated your point right here in this video. Because she was just saying that, Trump didn't trust Gabbard, and that could be why she may not have been included, or her info may not have been, trusted, when getting advice. So that's interesting. So yeah, we have Glenn Sharp here saying CNN is fake news. Welcome to the check-in. And he says she has no idea what she's talking about. Go back to The View, moron. So was she on The View? I don't know this lady. But okay, let me get back to this.
Right now in our country is that whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, I think there is a lot of skepticism is what our leadership is doing. And it's not because we're playing, with toy soldiers on a table at night. It's because there are real lives that are at stake. And it's not just the lives of soldiers, but there are people who can't put food on the table because the gas prices there are so many collateral consequences because of this action. And it just doesn't feel like our leaders are being honest with us. Now, if the end game in this is that you are fine with going to war with Iran, regardless, whether they had nukes or not,
I think the American people would actually appreciate that honesty. Like, we don't want them to have any power, and we are going to take them out with our allies in Israel. If that's your truth, say it. But don't lie to us and make us believe that we're stupid when we can also, we watch the same news, we read the same thing, and the inconsistencies are there. And so what is really under all of this, why this testimony is so troubling is that, why would you leave that paragraph out conveniently? Because they run over the clock every day in Congress. Yeah. So today we're going to play by the rules?
And she was
imminent? Was Fulton County imminent?
She was hardly able to keep a straight face as she pretended that it was a tiny issue.
I think that's a really good point. It's a question, though, of whether or not you agree with the tactics versus whether or not you agree with the underlying issue. Point to a
it's also whether you agree with the outcome.
But point to a president who hasn't said they don't want to see Iran have power in the Middle East and they don't want them to have access to nukes. Like, every presidency has taken that position. So the tactics are different, and I think that that's a fair, obvious conversation to have and a debate to have. And I think we should always be skeptical, regardless of who the president is in power, which party they're from, when we strike militarily. I think that that is a completely healthy conversation. But it is clear the end goal is the same for absolutely every president, at least in modern history, that Iran cannot obtain nuclear weapons.
But is the end goal regime change? Or is it not?
I do think that you guys are circling on actually
we're making similar points.
Similar points. But I think the point that Ashley's making is an important one, which is that to your point, every president has had the same disposition about Iran. This president chose to act on it and use the justification of an imminent attack on the United States. And if that justification is not accurate, that would be misleading. Whereas there was another path that they could have chosen. They could have said, these are our objectives as a nation. We believe that this needs to be dealt with now and not later. Let's build a coalition. Let's go to Congress. Let's do it a particular way. Let's put it all on the table. And they could have done it that way. They did not. And so there is an accountability for the justification, because it does matter. Truthfulness in a democracy.
And if they're lying to the American people, we know leaders have to make tough decisions, and people can't know all the intelligence before the strike happens. You can't sometimes win in that way. But you should not be lying to the American people, especially when soldiers die because of it.
Okay, y'all. So what I was trying to do, I was trying to write a comment to Stewart 2004, but ended up tagging myself. And I was wanting to know, are these folks on the panel we just saw, are they Democrats? Because I have no idea. Anyway, we also had in here, well, his comment was, here we go again. Democrats trying to take down Trump again, this time by limiting his presidential powers that he had the legal right to do. I think there are, well, you may have been here for most of it. They were really talking about whether or not Gabbard didn't have the responsibility of telling Trump what was imminent threat. She's saying that Trump decides that, and they're saying that they believe that that is the job of Gabbard and her team to provide the intelligence and to provide that perspective, right, regarding what is an imminent danger or imminent threat to the United States, right? So there's that. And then we have Arthur Price, 4460, saying Democrats have a problem with war. They have a problem with President Trump. Okay. Then we have Tall Man 85 here. Welcome. We got Bull Monkey here. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Bull Monkey. So next up, we have the actual clip from Ms. Gabbard, where she states that Trump is the one that determines imminent threat. Let's get into that.
Did you brief the president if he starts a war of choice that the likely result would be that Iran would strike adjacent Gulf nations and close the Strait of Hormuz? Did you brief him on those two facts that I think have been consistently the assumptions of the intelligence community?
I have not and won't divulge internal conversations. I will say that those of us within the intelligence community continue to provide the president with all of the best objective intelligence available to inform his decisions.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False.
and
This
he
is the
made that
worldwide. This is the
determination.
worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that, as the White House claimed on March 1st, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
Once again, Senator, the intelligence community has provided the inputs that make up this annual threat assessment.
You won't answer the
It is
question.
the nature of the imminent threat that the president has to make that determination based on a collection and volume
You're here
of
to be
information and
timely.
intelligence that he is
You're here-
provided with.
You're here to be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
Exactly what I'm doing.
No, you're evading a question because to provide a candid response to the committee would contradict a statement from the White House.
Okay. So, I mean, he laid it out for her, saying she's evading the question. And she continued to say that basically, you know, she can't divulge what she's talked to the president about, and they've given him proper intelligence information. So next up, we have a clip of her being asked of what did she share with Trump as far as intelligence regarding what the Iranians had as far as, like, you know, weaponing. So let's see what she said to that. Probably more of the same, right?
Mr. Chairman, Director Gabbard, last year your agencies testified, and I quote, Iran's large conventional forces are capable of inflicting substantial damage to an attacker, executing regional strikes, and disrupting shipping, particularly energy supplies, through the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, every problem we're seeing now was not only foreseeable, but was actually predicted by the intelligence agencies. So, Director, in the lead up to the start of this war 3 weeks ago, did the intelligence agencies stick to their assessment that in response to an attack, the Iranians had the capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz?
Thank you, Senator Wyden. The intelligence community has continued to provide the president and his team with the intelligence related to this operation in Iran before and on an ongoing basis.
So right now, we're in a global energy crisis. We're paying more for gas. The economy is in danger. And it seems to me, and I heard you discuss this with Senator Warner too, that there's a lot of hedging going on with respect to entirely foreseen consequences of the war. And that strikes me, Madam Director, as what amounts to a historic mistake. Now, my second question is, did the intelligence agencies assess that the Iranians could respond to a regime change attack from us by attacking U.S. forces and other Americans in the region?
The IC assessment has always taken very seriously the threat of the Iranian regime's missile capabilities and how our American troops within the region may be put at risk.
Again, you know, it seems to me with Americans dying in the war, it's hard to see how you can sit here and say that the intelligence agencies couldn't provide a clear warning that if attacked, the Iranians would respond by attacking our people. Now, on Monday, Madam Director, Donald Trump was asked about Iranian strikes on the Gulf states. He said, and I quote, no, the greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit the Gulf states. You all are supposed to be the greatest experts. That's what we have you there for. Director Gabbard, did the intelligence agencies assess that Iran could conduct strikes on our own partners in the region if it was attacked?
The intelligence community has continued to assess the potential threats to the region, the existing threats to the region, and providing those assessments to the policymakers and decision makers.
Okay, y'all. So she continued with her same responses with that. You know, we did see how a reporter had asked Hegseth, like, hey, how did you guys not, you know, prepare for the Iranians to, close off the Strait of Hormuz, which you can tell Hegseth is a little bit perturbed with the question, but a lot of people have been asking that, okay? Because it doesn't appear as if they anticipated this, although we've been told that when they do their war planning and things, that's a scenario that they have taken into consideration, for years, right? So there's that. Now we have Talman 85. I guess he's saying, I'm not saying her name correctly. My apologies. I was trying to. I think it's Gabbard, is what I heard someone say on the thing. Gabbard. So let me know if I'm saying it incorrectly. We got Bull Monkey saying, if Trump isn't a bastard, why does he keep supply evidence to suggest the contrary? Then we have Stewart 2004 saying Gabbard isn't the Secretary of War. That's correct. Hegseth is. Then we have Holdhammer, welcome to the check-in, saying Kamala Harris said Iran is an imminent threat. Okay. Then we have Gabbard saying, no, we have Bull Monkey saying that Gabbard is 44. She looks much older than Bondi. I didn't think she was 44, but thank you for letting me know that. And then we have Rob Davidson here saying, what is this old buzzard ranting about? Are you talking about the gentleman? He's trying to figure out why did the United States not better prepare for the possibility of the Iranians closing off the Strait of Hormuz. That's what he's trying to get at. So next up, we do have a clip because someone mentioned in the chat that Joe Kent is under FBI investigation. So let's get into that.
Multiple sources tell ABC News the FBI is investigating Joe Kent, who just resigned as director of the National Counterterrorism Center. The sources say he is being investigated for potentially leaking classified information, but did not offer specifics. ABC News also reports the probe began before Kent's resignation on Tuesday over opposition to the Iran war. Kent accused Israel of luring President Trump into attacking Iran and that the Middle Eastern country did not pose an imminent threat, as the president claimed.
Okay, well, there we have it. So he was already under investigation by the FBI before he decided to resign. So that's kind of interesting, right? You're under investigation and you decide to put out this letter and then state you couldn't in good conscience continue doing what you was doing. So I guess we'll see what kind of comes out of this investigation possibly. So next up, after everything happened last night with the oil fields being attacked and whatnot, Hegseth and General Kane did a press conference this morning. And so they were asked initially about the moving of assets out of Saudi Arabia, out of the Middle East, rather. So they were asked about the moving of United States assets out of the Middle East. So let's see what Hegseth had to say about that.
Absolutely. Brown jacket at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Jonathan Dre with Roca Politics. As you said, at the end of this war, Iran will be without a missile or drone capability, a navy, or the ability to make nuclear weapons. Since the largest threat and sponsor of terror in the region will be incapacitated, are there plans to move assets and troops out of the Middle East? I guess in a perfect world, a year after the war has ended, what does the military presence in the Middle East look like compared to before the war?
Well, I appreciate the question. I do think when you address a real threat head on, it creates new options on the other side, right? I think what President Trump refuses to do, which too often this town does, is just sit in the status quo. Oh, nobody can do about that. They've got too much capability. What if this happens? What if that happens? He instead says, what's in the interest of the American people? It's going to take some courage. It's going to take some capabilities. We're going to have to gather some forces there in order to do it. We're not going to tell people how many or how long or what we're willing to do or what we're not willing to do. But if you do that and do that decisively, then out the other end is a recognition that it opens the aperture of what's possible. I mean, President Trump did the same thing in creating an opportunity for the Abraham Accords. Now you've got a situation where a lot of those countries are coming alongside us, recognizing the threat of Iran. So I think our posture in the future will be based first and foremost on our own national security, power projection, the ability to defend our people and our interests. But no doubt, working alongside our partners, the president will look at what makes the most sense going forward. I appreciate that question. Yes.
Okay.
As part of the justification for the war against Iran, the White House has laid out in fairly comprehensive fashion the Iranian regime's 47 years of terrorism aimed at the U.S., including pointing to the IRGC's provision of weapons and EFPs to help kill Americans in Iraq. The Pentagon in 2019 assessed Iran was responsible for the deaths of at least 603 service members in Iraq, but there hasn't been a similar public accounting by Iran's role helping the Taliban in Afghanistan. And that also hasn't been part of the White House's public argument. I was wondering if you could speak to Iran's role in helping the Taliban during the war in Afghanistan. And Chairman, as you and the Secretary eloquently spoke about, 13 U.S. service members have been killed so far during Operation Epic Fury. I was wondering what lessons have been learned from those deaths, both from Iranian strikes, from an aircraft refueling accident. How are those lessons being applied to the current conflict, and how are those lessons going to be applied to a potential conflict in Indo-PACOM?
And lessons learned.
Well, thank you for the question. And it's true. In a town that can have a very short memory, President Trump does not. He remembers what this Iranian regime was founded on, what their declaration has been from the beginning: death to America, death to Israel. They've stated that. They've intended to, in every way, try to accomplish that, killing Americans in any theater they can, embassies for quite a long time. In Iraq, that was the deadliest weapon, was the EFP, the explosively formed penetrator. I was there when that tactic and technique started to emerge, and the realization was it wasn't just jihadis putting together 155 rounds daisy chained. It was an entire state, a country with its apparatus able to mold steel in a way that was specifically designed to penetrate American armor and kill Americans. This was not, maybe we send them a couple of thoughts about how to build a bomb. This was Iran specifically passing technology and wherewithal and personnel into Iraq to kill Americans specifically. I know the number is said to be 600. A lot of us think it's higher than that, given the amount of capability they brought in. So they have been at war with us, whether we acknowledge it or not, for 47 years. The same goes in Afghanistan. Name the Islamist enemy, whether they are Sunni or Shia, because this is a Shia regime, Sunni or Shia, and Iran's been willing to harbor them as long as that group is willing to try to kill Americans. So the enemy of their enemy has been their friend as well in the Islamist world. So Iran, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's around the world, has been targeting Americans. And what they wanted in this context, and what President Trump would not tolerate, is a regime of that nature being closer and closer to nuclear capabilities, a capability they would have said they would want to use, and we ought to believe what our enemies say they would do if they got the most dangerous weapon in the world. So it's been across every theater that Iran's been a threat to America, and sometimes we have to remind folks of that, but thank goodness we have a commander-in-chief who, on behalf of this country, has internalized that and said, hey, we're going to do something about it.
Jerry, I do want to talk about the lessons learned question because it's important to me. I won't share particular tactical lessons, and the KC-135 incident is under investigation. But I do want to talk about how I think about this and how we think about it. And this is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I believe the Joint Force has to be a very fast learning organization. Early, often, and always. And so in each case, both at the strategic, operational, and tactical level, we've charged the Joint Force to look at themselves and say, what was our plan? Well, first, did we have a plan, yes or no? The answer is always yes, because we plan for literally everything. Did we execute our plan, yes or no? If we did it work? If not, why not? If we didn't execute our plan but did something better, what's the lesson learned associated with that? And then how do we quickly capture those lessons after every loss or every engagement and quickly adopt those lessons and then share them across the entirety of the Joint Force? And inside the Joint Staff, we've tasked our J7 Directorate under the lead of Lieutenant General Lazewski, a United States Marine, to be extremely entrepreneurial in harvesting and capturing those lessons in a proactive and not reactive way. In fact, we've got teammates from the J7 who are now spread out across the CENTCOM theater, both here in the States and forward, to ensure that in every opportunity we do not miss a chance to grab that lesson and quickly accelerate it into the practice that we adopt inside the joint force, so that if there's a loss or if there's something that we can learn from, that we learn it not only in the CENTCOM AOR, but we adapt it across all of the combatant commands, not just Indo-PACOM. And it's across all of the warfighting functions. I've asked them to look rigorously, to check our egos at the door, to remember this is about what's right, not who's right, and to be clinical around the way we look at lessons learned, because we owe it to the force to do that. Thanks for that question.
Okay, that was a good answer. That basically, hey, we've had a lot of loss here, and you don't want to continue that. So they're saying that they are writing down lessons learned and trying to apply it across, I guess the service. That's a good response, right? So next up, first of all, if you're here, please make sure that you like the stream as well as subscribe to the channel if you are so inclined. I appreciate you guys being here. What do we have here in the comments? We do have Bull Monkey asking about our blinds, asking me and Christopher Moreau. Let's see. We have Arthur Price saying, now under President Trump, Gaza-Israeli war now is what's called a genocide. Under Biden, it was never called a genocide. Harris says she wouldn't do anything different. Okay. So I don't know how long Kent was in the job. I thought he got in the job after after Trump got in office, which Trump has only been in office right at 14 months. Yeah. So couldn't be more than that. But unfortunately, my tablet has died, so I can't look that up. Let's see. We also have let's see. Is that it? Oh, we have Food Gaming. Welcome to the check-in. Saying they learned threatening American come with the price. They lost all their leaders. Okay. All right. So we have all things key. Nicole, hey girl, welcome back. Haven't seen you in a while. We have Wilson here saying hello. Hello, Wilson Duomo. And we got Chris Romero subscribing. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So we're going to go ahead now and transition into this Operation Epic Fury update. Let's get into it.
Let's get to this from the Pentagon now. All systems go. Moments ago, we mentioned delivering an update on Operation Epic Fury. CENTCOM releasing new video of U.S. forces in action, taking out Iranian naval targets that threaten international shipping in and near the Strait of Hormuz. The scope and success of the fight against the Iranian government on full display. Screen right.
And the devastating hits against the terror regime's ability to spread its radical agenda in the Middle East, highlighting the firepower of the U.S. military. So the top brass saying that today's strikes will go to a new level and that they have the tools to get the job done.
Today will be the largest strike package yet, just like yesterday was. As I've said from day one, our capabilities continue to build, Iran's continue to degrade.
U.S. CENTCOM remains on plan to achieve our military objectives and remain unrelenting in our pursuit of Iranian missile capabilities, UAV capabilities, and their Navy, and as the Secretary said, their industrial base. Each day we continue to attack deeper into Iranian territory.
This is a clear set of objectives. The president has given us every capability we need to accomplish that. We've got the best in the world in uniform executing it on the ground. They believe in and are invested in this mission, and it will be at the president's choosing, ultimately, where we say, hey, we've achieved what we need to on behalf of the American people to ensure our security. So no time set on that, but we're very much on track.
Okay, so some of the headlines right there. 11 submarines are gone as well. Lucas Tomlinson picks up the coverage. He is live in the Persian Gulf today. Lucas.
Bill, Secretary Hegseth says the U.S. is winning this war decisively, and General Kane says U.S. strike missions are now flying deeper and penetrating Iranian airspace further to the east. He also says A-10s and Apache helicopter gunships are now on station flying missions in Iran's southern flank. This all comes after Iran followed through on its threat to launch strike missions on energy facilities across the Persian Gulf after Israel launched strikes on the world's largest gas field. Iran also hit a Saudi refinery on the Red Sea, demonstrating it still has some reach. General Kane admitted there's work left to be done to destroy Iranian forces.
They came into this fight with a lot of weapons. This is why we continue to be as aggressive and assertive as we can against their ballistic missile capability, both their medium-range ballistic range missile capabilities. So we are continuing to hunt and find them and kill them.
Early this morning, Israeli jets hit Iran's South Pars gas field located in the Persian Gulf, a field shared with Qatar. It's the largest in the world and supplies a major portion of Iran's domestic gas. The vast majority of Qatar's gas ships to Asia, with China and India the principal buyers. It's worth noting, Bill, Iran was hitting oil and gas facilities like this across the Persian Gulf even before these Israeli strikes. And in Saudi Arabia, Iran firing ballistic missiles at Riyadh while diplomats from neighboring Gulf countries and across the Middle East were meeting. And Emirati air defenses have been active today, shooting down 7 Iranian ballistic missiles and 15 drones as Iran continues to attack energy infrastructure in this country.
All right,
Bill?
Lucas, thanks. Leading our coverage there in Dubai. Thank you, sir. Mike Sorelli comes in for analysis. Chief Talent Officer of Overwatch Mission Critical and a retired U.S. Navy SEAL. And good day to you, sir. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks, Bill.
What did you hear in the Pentagon briefing?
That the war is on track. You know, they are decimating the Iranian regime's war-making capability. Now, the essential thing here is that we put the nail in the coffin. Give the military time. Let's be persistent. Let's have resolve to continue degrading their military capability, as well as removing as many of the regime leaders as we can.
Mike, Tulsi Gabbard just testified in front of Congress that the regime is largely intact. So what needs to happen there?
Intact, but tattered. Arguably, there is very little organizational coherence to the regime right now. So again, with military operations, we know this. It's a theory of systematic attrition. Not only their military infrastructure, but also their regime leadership. And beyond the regime leadership, it's also looking at the internal security apparatus, the Bajis, which we eliminated the Bajis commander just a few days ago. If we can erode at that internal, security apparatus and really uplift the Iranian people, their ability to oppose the regime, that may result in a different picture.
How about the tit for tat we've seen in the last 24 hours? Tit for tat is a nice phrase, right? A little too kind. They're going after each other's energy supplies, natural gas and oil. What do you make of that escalation now, Mike?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. So, Iran's only playbook is to go after soft targets to hold the global energy market hostage. I assure you that is not momentum. They cannot go toe-to-toe, state-to-state, or conventional military on conventional military. So that is actual leverage for us. I would think President Trump is holding off on striking their oil infrastructure with the intent of passing that off to the Iranian people if they do take over the regime. But this is the point of the war. We can no longer allow Iran to cause instability and to hold the global markets hostage. And that is the next phase of this operation, is eliminating their capabilities to hold those markets hostage.
So we are about to enter, the 4th week, okay? And to me, obviously, you can see the military doing everything that it needs to do. But there is an interesting piece of the diplomacy that has to either kind of go along with it and get in sync with this. But because of what you just said, that the regime is in tatters, it's very hard to do diplomacy if there's no one to talk to.
And that's the question. Who's truly in charge in Iran? And guys, there's going to be a lot of backdoor political conversations going on with those who are in power with Iran. But the Gulf states are going to weigh in heavily here. One, for the first time, they're unified. They're unified alongside Israel, which could lead to an Abraham's Accord 2.0, which looks like a very different Middle East. But those backdoor negotiations will probably continue until we identify who the right leader is, who has control, and who has the ability to make decisions on behalf of the Iranian regime.
So, Mike, how do you gauge the public's reaction thus far? This is a war largely fought with satellites yet again. But we have seen the movement on behalf of the Pentagon to move the Marines in. It's still about a week away. And there's more reporting suggesting that more personnel may be sent to the region, which gives the idea that a new phase may begin very soon. As you analyze that militarily, what would that new phase look like?
Well, I would assure the public Trump is not going to put mass troops on the ground. What he is probably exercising is the possibility or the option to utilize the U.S. Marine Corps to seize Carg Island or the South Power fields. Now, here's the thing. You know, for the American public, I think the media has gotten this wrong. Iran is not winning. We are. And that's the key difference here, is the media has to be responsible in this coverage, and it's almost grading the war hour by hour. Guys, we've degraded close to 90% of their military infrastructure. We have to, and I'm going to rob the 1939 British propaganda, stay calm and carry on, because we have the possibility, the generational possibility of removing a threat that has held us hostage since for 47 years.
Mike, thank you so much for being with us as we kick off America's Newsroom today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, that was the update kind of on what's going on with Operation Epic Fury. And so I don't know if you guys were tracking, but we talked about how Kristi Noem was being, removed from DHS. And so they're putting this guy named Markwayne Mullins in her position. So they started doing, I guess, the hearing, if you will, where the different senators get to ask some questions. And so apparently he has some history with Mr. Rand Paul. And it became a little interesting, to say the least. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, okay?
Recently, Senator Mullin, if you have time to listen, you were confronted by constituents that were angry because you voted against my amendment to stop all funding for refugee welfare programs. Instead of explaining your vote to continue these welfare programs for refugees, you decided to transfer the blame. You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted. I was shocked that you would justify and celebrate this violent assault that caused me so much pain and my family so much pain. I just wonder if someone who applauds violence against their political opponents is the right person to lead an agency that has struggled to accept limits to the proper use of force. You have never had the courage to look me in the eye and tell me that the assault was justified. So today you'll have your chance. Today I'll give you that chance to clear the record. Tell it to my face. If that's what you believe, tell it to me today. Tell the world why you believe I deserve to be assaulted from behind, have 6 ribs broken and a damaged lung. Tell me to my face why you think I deserved it. And while you're at it, explain to the American public why they should trust a man with anger issues to set the proper example for ICE and Border Patrol agents.
I think before I can start my opening statement, I have to address the remarks that the chairman made, calling me a liar. Sir, I think everybody in this room knows that I'm very blunt and direct to the point. And if I have something to say, I'll say it directly to your face. If you recall, back in my House days, we actually did have this conversation because of the remarks that I've made. You were in a room. I simply addressed that I said I could understand because of the behavior you were having, that I could understand why the neighbor did what he did. As far as my terms as a snake in the grass, sir, I work around this room to try to fix problems. I've worked with many people in this room. Seems like you fight Republicans more than you work with us. I did address those remarks. I did explain your gimmicks by the amendment you put forth. And as far as me saying that I invoke violence, I don't. I don't think anybody should be hit by surprise. I don't like that. But if I do have something to say, everybody in this room knows I'll come straight to you. I'll say it publicly and I'll say it privately, but I'll never say it behind your back. So for you to say, I'm a liar, sir, that's not accurate. And I got proof to say that because you have spent millions of dollars in my campaigns against me because we just don't get along. However, sir, that doesn't keep me at all from doing my job. I can have different opinions with everybody in this room, but as Secretary of Homeland, I'll be protecting everybody, including Kentucky, as much as I will my own backyard in Oklahoma.
The record should show, and I think will show, a lack of contrition, no apology, and no regrets for your support. You completely understand the violence that was perpetrated on me. You're unrepentant. The only thing you quibble about is whether I met you somehow when you were in the house. I don't think we ever met when you were in the house. And this idea that the only thing you're upset about is not that you were for violence. What you're upset about is that I called you a liar because you said it to my face. It's really more about this machismo that you have. When in Oklahoma, the media asked you about the refugee welfare programs, the programs you voted to continue funding, it was this whole idea that you were going to transfer it because you were uncomfortable, your anger, low impulse control, causes you to then go after and decide that you're going to go after me as well. And so you say you completely understood that I was assaulted from behind, had 6 ribs broken and part of my lung removed, and that was just fine. That's something that you, I guess, approve of as far as resolution of political problems. When I talked to you privately on the phone, there was no apology. You just said, well, we can let our political difference, go by. And you said a few minutes ago, we can just set it aside. Well, political differences we can, but when you say that you agree with a felon, a Trump-hating felon who attacked me, somehow you think I'm just going to set that aside? Oh, it's no big deal. I lay in pain for 2 months, had 6 ribs broken, 3 of them separated, grinding upon bone for months, had part of my lung removed, and you think that's great and to be extolled. I mean, the sheer lack of any kind of self-awareness that you're going to be leading thousands of men and women who will have the use of force, and there's been great questions in our country about how that will be used, and you think a violent attack is just fine. So I guess my first question is, do you think that justifying that kind of violence sets a good example for the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I didn't know the extent of your damage. When the phone call was made, I made it to you and I tried to talk to you. You didn't engage at all. In fact, you said, get your paperwork in. It's got to be 3 days in between.
You offered no apology.
Sir?
And you offer no apology today and no regrets. Haven't heard the word apologize, haven't heard the word regret, haven't heard I misspoke and it was heated and I made a mistake. Haven't heard any of those words.
Sir, actually, it wasn't heated, and I'm not apologizing for pointing out your character.
Good. So you're jolly well fine, and you want the American public and the people up here to vote, that may or may not vote for you, to know that you supported the felonious, violent attack on me from behind.
I did not say I supported it. I said I understood it. There's a difference.
So that means you really didn't approve of it, just completely understand it. What do you think most people would interpret completely understand to be? Support for or a condemnation of the violence?
Sir, as I said, we can have our differences. It's not going to keep me from doing my job as Secretary of Homeland Security. I'm going to secure Kentucky and take care of Kentucky as much as I am Oklahoma.
If this were a one-off, it would be one thing. If you just disliked me so much that you approved of violence against me, people could just write it off. Well, maybe they hate each other. But really, there's a pattern of this. Let's go ahead and roll the tape.
We can be good second adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold it. Oh, stop it.
Say
solution over call. No, sit down. Sit down. You're a United States Senator. Sit down. Okay. Sit down, please.
All right. Can I respond?
Hold it.
If he got up too, would you have gone at it right there?
I would have probably jumped over the dais at that point. You have to be called out. It's not this guy continues to get away with this stuff, and it's just, it's silly, it's stupid, but every now and then you get punched in the face. Well, go back to the 1800s and 1700s. They used to have canes.
And duels. They used to have duels.
Yeah. Right. And there's a way that men used to settle their differences. I ignored him 4 times to be part of that. And people say, yes, you're supposed to ignore it. Well, I'm not a very good Christian. I try to be a good Christian. And I know people say you're supposed to turn the other cheek. I prefer the David method.
But we need to move from an almost...
By the way, I'm not afraid of Biden. I will Biden.
Fighting?
Oh, I'm in a fight. I'm going to fight. I'll do anything. I'm not, and I don't care where I fight. It's just...
In hindsight, any requests?
No, I really don't.
So no regrets. In fact, even after your anger had cooled, you were still bragging that if he'd only been brave enough to stand up, you'd have jumped over the dais and taught him a lesson, because that's how men should settle their differences. Do you think fighting as a resolution for political differences is a good example for the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol?
As you can notice over my shoulder here is my good friend Sean O'Brien. Both of us have had conversations, both of us have shaken hands, and both of us agreed we could have done things different. Sean is someone that has become a close friend. We talk all the time. I've been on his podcast. We've talked through this. That's how you handle your differences. Not like this, Chairman.
I'm glad you guys are friends now and that you've reconciled. But really, it doesn't get to the real point whether or not you think violence is the way we settle things. In the days after the fight, you said, and I quote, "Sometimes people just need to be punched in the face." Oh. Is that still your opinion, that political disputes can sometimes and often only be resolved by violence?
No, I don't always agree with that. I don't believe in political violence. I've made that very clear. But sometimes people do need, theoretically speaking, sir, I get it. It's about character assassination for you. That's the way this game is played. I understand it. And you are making this about you, which is fine, but that doesn't keep me as Secretary of Homeland Security.
Character assassination when you were the one lauding the assault. Who do you think started that character assassination? I'm just repeating what you have done in character assassination. I'm repeating your support for the assault. So that's somehow something I started?
No, sir. What I'm saying is you're adding a lot to it.
In the days after the fight, you did many interviews in which you justified the violence as historically justified by precedents, such as caning and dueling. Is it today your opinion that the caning of Charles Sumner was not only justified, but argues still for resolving our political differences with violence?
What I was simply pointing out is some of the rules that still apply to this body. For instance, dueling with two consenting adults is still there. I was pointing out what is still
illegal for 170 years. There's no precedent for legal dueling. Even then, they fled the country. Do you realize that the man that beat Charles Sumner with a cane, he beat him till he was unconscious? You know why no senators intervened? Because his friend held a gun on the other senators, and he kept beating him until he crushed his skull. That's what you're insinuating is the precedent of the Senate, and that's what you live by. That is a very, very dangerous sentiment. After a half a dozen victory lap interviews where you pointed out that the union guy was just lucky that fear kept him from standing up, Dana Bash asked you if you have any regrets about bringing violence to a Senate committee, and you replied that you have no regrets. Today you've said you have no regrets about being happy, being completely understanding why I was attacked from behind. You had no regrets about, instigating a brawl in a Senate committee hearing. Are those still your opinions?
Mr. Chairman, you're going to have your opinion. I'm going to have mine. As Secretary of Homeland Security, I'm going to bring peace of mind and security to this country, and I'm going to stay laser focused on that.
CNN correspondent Priscilla Alvarez is here with us as well. Priscilla, there were some major fireworks right out of the gate in the exchange between Senator Markwayne Mullin and the chairman of the committee, Rand Paul. It got pretty ugly. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Wolf, this was immediately an intense hearing at kickoff between the Republican chairman, Rand Paul, and Senator Markwayne Mullin, dating back to some history the two of them have, specifically as it relates to an attack by Rand Paul's neighbor in 2017 and the comments made by Markwayne Mullin at the time. And so Rand Paul and Senator Markwayne Mullin were going back and forth about that exchange and Rand Paul pressing him on whether he regretted anything that he said then. Not only that, but also the way that he confronted a witness during a separate hearing a couple years ago as well. Essentially, the argument being made was whether he felt that he had the temperament to be the Homeland Security Secretary and whether this was the model that he intended to role model, rather, for the federal agents within the Department of Homeland Security. Now, the senator didn't necessarily respond to that. He pointed pointed back to Sean O'Brien, who he's had disputes with before, saying that now they are friends. He also did not apologize to Senator Paul over his comments at the time over that 2017 attack. But all of this really manifested in this very intense start to this hearing, again, between two Republican senators, the chairman and Senator Markwayne Mullin, who is testifying for this role of Homeland Security Secretary. I will also say beyond that, there have been some notable comparisons and contrast being made between the senator and Secretary Noem. For example, he said that he would own his mistakes. He also said, quote, "My goal in 6 months is that we're not in the lead story every day." He also went on to say that he regretted his statements after the shootings of the 2 U.S. citizens by federal agents in Minneapolis, saying that he, quote, "went there too fast." So as this hearing is going, you can already start to see how he's trying to differentiate himself from Secretary Noem, who, of course, was under immense scrutiny for the way that she managed the Department of Homeland Security, not only among senators, but also within the department itself.
Ooh, okay. So we saw the fireworks between Senator Rand and Senator Mullins. And so John Fetterman, he's a Democrat. He decided to do what I call, can we all just get along type of thing. But he was just saying they need to just move on from this. But let's go ahead and kind of see how he tries to be the voice of reason, okay? Interesting.
So, hello, Senator Mullin. Thank you for coming in today. So, Americans don't like chaos, you know. America definitely didn't like the kinds of chaos during the Biden administration at the border. You know, as a Democrat, I was alarmed that there were up to 300,000 encounters at our border once a month. And that puts that in perspective. That's the size of Pittsburgh showing up at our border. And that's not sustainable, and that's not manageable, and it's making it possible for us to assimilate. And now if you care about immigration, as I deeply do, you can't possibly provide the American dream for people when the size of Pittsburgh showing up at our border once a month. That need to be brought under control. And that happened. I signed up that as a Democrat. The second part is rounding up all of the criminals and deport them. You know, I can't imagine why we can't agree with that as well, too. That's another thing that I signed up. One name that often doesn't come from my side is Laken Riley. I agree for Renee Good, and I agree for Alex Petty, but I also deeply, deeply agree for Laken Riley and their family. And now all three were failures of our government there in that circumstances. And as I was proud to be the co-sponsor of the Laken Riley bill, because we have to address that. Two things must be true here. We need to have a secure border, and we have to round up and deport every single criminal in our nation. I can't imagine why that's critical or controversial for anybody, you know. So I'm trying to find a way forward. And now you and I have had conversations on this, and that's your commitment to focus on those things. I believe that's effective, accurate, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And now another thing. I know there's a lot of hard personal feelings here, and absolutely, it's terrible what's happened, and political violence. I mean, it's rampant. So now. But also, President O'Brien's here not for round two. He's here because he fully supports your correct. Yeah, round three. Okay. Yeah. So it's about letting it go and moving on. And I've done that too. When I was in the hospital and things were touch and go, you know, I know there were unkind things said about me, but I can just say that it's better to just let it all go and to find a way forward. That's the time that we're in right now in our country on that. Now, people might describe you in those kinds of moments, but I'm going to describe you. We got a chance to get to know better when we joined a codel to Turks and Caicos, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and we did that. We did that because Americans were looking at over a decade in prison because they had a couple random bullets in their luggage. And those Americans ran the gamut of a black grandmother from Florida, I believe, Florida, and Pennsylvania, that live in Western Pennsylvania, that I did, and I was able to welcome him at the airport when he returned there. So that was about a commitment to working together. Imagine, just because a couple random bullets accidentally, they were looking at over a decade in prison. Now, we worked together, and now not one single American really faced that kinds of thing. So that's about committed to working together. So now, and also as a Democrat, that I made me the only Democrat that refused to shutting our DHS down. Some people might say that doesn't mean I have any less commitment to reform ICE. That's just categorically not true. But it's a strange devotion. I don't understand why you would shut the entire agency down just because you want those kind of reforms on ICE that has absolutely no impact on ICE and doesn't force any of those things. I refuse to do that, and I refuse to punish those union members that are working. And now especially parts of that, it's true. It's like the cybersecurity agency is part of DHS.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's currently on the shutdown. And now 2 of the top agents of cyber attacks come from Iran and China. They must be elated to know that part is all shut down, because that's part of the shutdown that does not bring any reform to ICE. That I want any less than other Democrats, here. The difference is I refuse to punish and make our nation less secure part of that. So for me, I came here and I committed to come here with an open mind, and I'm going to continue to do that. And it's not going to be about gotcha moments. For me, it's about just saying, my experience with you has been consistent kindness and professionalism. The first time I met, it was you and your wife behind you when I was here at the orientation here in the Senate. And even before you got the call for the big job, we were even discussing about getting together and having dinner as family. So that's an ongoing relationship, because that's also part of the fact here in this town, you got to get along and find a way to work together. And now we have to come at it and just let things go in the past for that. Finding a way forward, that's my responsibility to represent Pennsylvania. And for you, I just want to thank you for showing up. And now I'm going to engage, and I'm going to remain with an open mind throughout all this, as I made to my friend here. And I'm going to do that. So thank you for bringing your family here too. And I look forward to hearing for the rest of my colleagues' views on you. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, y'all. So what Fetterman had to say regarding the Rand Paul and Markwayne Mullin situation. So he wanted to give support and I guess help his friend possibly, get his big position, right? So what do we have? We have Byron Floyd saying, okay, oh, he said, why does the bald guy look like looks like a chemo patient? I can't. He said, why does the bald guy look like a chemo patient? I think he said at some point that there may have been a medical situation he had with his family. So maybe he was the person that experienced the medical situation. I'm not sure. I see we got PB9FX. Wow, I gotta go. Have a good night. And we have Bull Monkey saying odd choice of garment. Who are we talking about with the garment? So next, y'all, we're gonna we talked about how they wanted to they requested for Pam Bondi to, give a deposition in regarding to how things were done with the Epstein trial. But according to Democrats, I believe that she had they had an opportunity to meet with her and ask what they want, but it's not necessarily a deposition. Okay, so we're gonna look into that. But I see we have Christopher Morrow saying that Fetterman had a stroke. Okay, I did not know that. Okay, so that explains what's I guess his appearance. So thank you for that. And so this is what the Democrats had to say regarding their private meeting with Bondi. Let's get into it.
Let's get to this from the Pentagon now. All systems go. Moments ago,
I'm sorry. I need to switch.
Her to, or if he would move for contempt hearings as he did for other people who did not respond to our subpoena. Instead of answering as an adult, he said that I was bitching, which is, again, something that would not be allowed if we were operating under the rules of this committee, because engaging in personalities is actually something that we are not able to do. If C-SPAN and the public were there, I'd imagine that he would not act that way. Neither here nor there, we expected AG Bondi to be adversarial. We expected her to be confrontational. And we expected her to not offer us much information. But that's why I introduced impeachment articles, because she has already been obstructing justice. She has already weaponized the DOJ. She has already ended investigations into Trump and his allies. She has used this role essentially as one to help the president. She does not answer to the president. The DOJ does not have the right or the privilege of withholding information from an active investigation, ignoring the laws of our land, which the Epstein Transparency Act is, with our subpoena from last July is. And the oversight Dems will continue to press for accountability. We'll continue to press for justice for survivors while also keeping them centered in this. So at the end of the day, we are still here seeking answers for women, for girls, and for the American public who has demanded justice, who have demanded answers to this, and whether or not they will pretend that the documents that they've given us is enough, we already know that they have not complied, and we are asking other people to make sure that we do not let them off the hook right now. So we look forward to her on the record deposition with our committee in response to our lawful subpoena.
I'll say a few more things, and I'm going to open up for questions, and if anyone wants to answer the questions. So just as a review, because I think it's very important, this fake hearing, we found out about it yesterday with no time to prepare, with no format given to us. We had no idea what the even format was going to be until just an hour or two before this kind of fake hearing that was set up. And it was clear from the minute it started that the Attorney General is trying to evade and not attend the mandated subpoena that is put in place. We asked her that question. Multiple members asked her the question. She would not respond. She said she'll continue to follow the law. That is not a response. She has a subpoena in place by Chairman Comer. If there's any questions, I'll take those now.
Sir, aside from the questions about the deposition, which I gather was one of your major focuses, what else have you guys been asking her about? What else has the conversation in the room been about? Because I know you all said you had a lot of questions.
I'm going to let Congressman Lynch. Sure.
Yeah. And I support everything that's been said by my colleagues. Remember, our desire to get the Attorney General and Todd Blanche under oath is because we've been faced with lies from the very beginning. Go back to February 21st, 2025. Pam Bondi told us and told the public that the Epstein file client list was on her desk. But then we found out that was a lie. Then she told us that on July 25th, 2025, she said, there's no need for any more disclosure on any of these Epstein files. Then we found out later there's 6 million documents. They give us 3 million of those. And now we find that we can't get access to a lot of that information because it's so heavily redacted. And then finally, with much pressure from the court.
We're going to take a quick break from covering that press conference to bring in Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico, who serves on the House Oversight Committee. So, Congresswoman, your fellow Democrats seem pretty fired up. What happened behind closed doors?
Yeah, well, I just walked out of the briefing room, and what is absolutely clear is that Pam Bondi has no intention of complying with the law and the subpoena that we've issued for her to be deposed under oath in front of the committee. In fact, what appears to have happened is that she and Todd Blanche volunteered to come brief the committee, and so we walked in today ready to hear information that they would provide to us about what's going on with the Epstein File Transparency Act, and basically they said, we've released what we're going to release, and now you can ask me questions. And there was no oath There were no cameras. The American public were locked out of the room, and it was clear that they were not prepared to answer questions about compliance with the law. And so ultimately, after Chairman Comer insulted Summer Lee, who is the lead in many ways on the subpoena, both of Pam Bondi and the subpoena of the Epstein files, and basically was extraordinarily disrespectful towards her, the Democrats walked out of the room because we're not going to play their games.
So just to be clear, the Transparency Act about the Epstein files, that required all of the files to be released by, I think it was in December, and there's something like 6 million of them. About 3 million have been released, 3 million have not. Of the 3 million that were released, the only thing that was supposed to be redacted was the names and identifying information of survivors. But it is clear that a lot of stuff that was redacted that wasn't pertaining to the survivors was pertaining to the potential perpetrators, and survivor information was actually accidentally included. So they are not in compliance with the law, according to, as I understand the law. Is that right?
Absolutely. And not only are they not in compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, they are not in compliance with a subpoena of the Epstein files. In fact, it's important to remember that going all the way back to August 5th, we subpoenaed the full unredacted Epstein files, and the administration has not even attempted to comply with that subpoena. And part of why we launched a bipartisan effort to change the law to force them through the Epstein File Transparency Act to comply with our subpoena is because they were not complying to begin with. Then they missed the deadline, the over-redacted, and Todd Blanche himself said today that basically they've released everything they're going to release. Well, that is not compliance with the law. In addition to that, I think what we were all shocked by today is that Pam Bondi was asked multiple times by my colleagues if she would comply with the subpoena for her own deposition under oath, and she refused to answer yes. So I think we can say very squarely that the cover-up continues.
Congresswoman, I believe we're here today because I think it was 4 or 5 Republicans on the Oversight Committee joined with all the Democrats to force Pam Bondi to come before the committee. Do the Republicans on the committee who joined you for that, are they with you in terms of the outrage you're obviously feeling about the fact that Bondi is not sitting for a deposition, and also the fact that the administration is not complying with the Epstein Transparency Act?
Well, I'll note that the subpoena for Pam Bondi to appear under oath was actually issued by Nancy Mace, who is a Republican from South Carolina. I did not see her in the room this afternoon. I don't know why, but I think it was clear that our colleagues across the aisle were running interference for Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, asking them leading questions. And like I said, it was set up like a sham hearing, not a briefing. They did not come in with any new information. They did not provide any sworn statements. And it appeared that our colleagues were basically trying to say, hey, look, they showed up. And we are not going to accept that as compliance with the law, because the law is clear. We have subpoenaed them, we have subpoenaed the files, and we have passed a bipartisan Transparency Act, which the president signed himself, and they have not complied with the law.
How do you reconcile that, before you go? How do you reconcile the fact that Republicans overwhelmingly voted for the Transparency Act? The Senate voted for it, I think, on a voice vote, meaning everybody voted for it, everybody agreed. And the president signed it into law. They all made this public display of supporting this transparency, but they're not doing it. How do you reconcile that?
Right. Well, I mean, my question is, how do they reconcile their own beliefs, their own values, their own morals, and their own politics with what the American people are demanding, including their oaths of office, which is that they follow the law themselves? So I think it's very clear the American people overwhelmingly are demanding justice for the survivors. They want accountability. They want perpetrators to be held accountable, and they can't run from that. And neither can the president. In fact, the questions are not going to end, whether it's questions about his own accusers, which have been covered up in the files, or it's the handling of this case. The American people are not going to let this go. And I think that my colleagues understand that, and that's why they have joined us on occasion to hold them accountable. But it is very clear that the Trump administration is doing everything that they can to run from this, and we are going to hold them accountable.
Okay. So that kind of gave a little bit of perspective that basically, as part of the Transparency Act and the subpoena that they issued, they feel they have not received all the files and they're not getting this deposition they want from Bondi. So they agreed to do well, they didn't agree. Bondi offered to do like a briefing to them, to this committee. They didn't know what they were going to, go in and participate in. And I guess the black lady was called a BITCH, she said, and if they would have had an actual like official testimony deposition, then that would not have occurred in that setting. So what I have here is Miss Bondi's response about what happened. So let's go ahead and get into that.
Madam Attorney General?
Sure.
Earlier this month, a bipartisan group of lawmakers on the House Oversight Committee voted to subpoena you to appear for a closed-door deposition. Will you commit to complying with that subpoena and appearing for a closed-door deposition?
I made it crystal clear I will follow the law.
But
Next question. Next question.
Victim attorneys say that the release of identifying of Epstein victims was one of the single most egregious violations of victim privacy in modern American history. You built your career on being a victim advocate.
Yeah.
Will you apologize to the victims? What do you have to say for that conduct?
Can you explain what you mean by identify? You mean victims' names that were released that shouldn't have been?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then
So
also other
yeah. So under the Epstein Transparency Act, we had 30 days to redact and release, under the law that was passed, 3 million documents. If you stack those up, that's the height of the Eiffel Tower. No other administration, under the Biden administration, they released 0 documents. So we did our very best to comply with the law. And of course, we don't want any victim to be further victimized. And that's why we had 500 attorneys with the Criminal Division, with the National Security Division, with the FBI working around the clock to do the best we could. I think it was less than 1% error. Todd, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's right. We said from the beginning that any mistakes that were made, and there should be no mistakes. And so when you say lawyers have said something, that's not a fair question, and you know it. Because we took pains to protect victims. When someone identified that there was a victim, we immediately pulled that document down, fixed it, and put it back up.
Immediately.
And so of course, we don't ever want to do anything to re-victimize anybody that was victimized by the horrible crimes of Mr. Epstein. And we didn't. To the extent that mistakes were made, and there were mistakes made because of the reasons the Attorney General just said. But when they were identified to us, we fixed them immediately.
And let me be clear on this case. This case has spanned multiple administrations. It started under Bush. It went to Obama. It went to Biden. We were no documents were released, only under the Trump administration. And we released 3 million documents, had 500 attorneys working on that, complying with the law the best we could, and protecting victims in doing it.
Madam Attorney General,
this
has been quite an odyssey for you. This began with an encounter you had with some activists in the Roosevelt Room where you handed out some binders. Then there was a discussion, a statement that the FBI and DOJ put out that this investigation was over. Flash ahead to a couple of weeks ago, you had a very unusual appearance before the House Judiciary Committee. Do you have any regrets? Is there anything you might have done differently? And do you think that your comportment and the department's comportment in this have exacerbated the public's lack of trust in this process?
Well, let me repeat what I just said. This has spanned 4 administrations: Bush, Obama, Trump 1, 45, where Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted, and then Joe Biden's administration, where 0 documents were provided. We have provided 3 million documents, the height of the Eiffel Tower, used 500 attorneys working around the clock, have identified, either they self-identified or through their attorneys, 1,200 victims who we did our very, very best to protect their identities. And so we're proud of the work that we've done on
Do you
this.
feel like
Go
this-
ahead. Next question. Go ahead.
Democrats on the committee walked out. They called it a quote fake hearing and said you were just trying to get around appearing for a deposition. Can you respond to those?
Sure. We were there to answer questions. It's the evening. We came at their convenience. We gave them really as much time as they wanted. And one congresswoman screamed C-SPAN wasn't in there, so she didn't want to ask questions. Yet all day long they've been on social media saying they had all these questions. We sat there saying, anything you want to ask us anything you want to ask us. And they screamed C-SPAN wasn't there, one of them, and then they stormed out of the meeting. So thank you all. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you.
Victims. Some victims have said they aren't satisfied with responses they've received from your office.
She walked off on that, didn't she? So yeah, she's making the point. Well, this spans, multiple administrations, and none of them provided any documents, and we did, and we made some mistakes. We correct those mistakes. Like these are some bad mistakes to make. Yeah, I don't know, Lou. I do not know where Pam Bondi is from. Do not know. And yes, Bull Monkey said that they didn't say she was a B. They said she was BN, bitching. Okay, so let me get that corrected. Purple Penguin is saying incredible deflection. And then we have him also saying, I hate when they make the Biden comparison. Merrick Garland owed us and early failed, and he had an axe to grind. Obama wanted him on SCOTUS. Okay. So we have debater of everything present. Welcome to the check-in. You single? No, I'm not. Bull Monkey says, I think she's the most physically attractive 60-year-old I've seen. That lady is 60? Yeah, she got it going on. Go ahead, Miss Bondi. And Bull Monkey and Lou confirmed that she is from Florida and from Fox News. Okay. So next up, y'all, we're gonna go and visit our friend Trump a little bit. Trump had a guest today from Japan, and he was asked a question. And so I want you to see how he responded regarding the Pearl Harbor. Let's get into it.
One more question for the prime minister. Let me pick a beautiful person from Japan. A question for the prime minister. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, he doesn't believe he's beautiful.
Oh, okay.
He's sounding shy.
We're
Go ahead,
Japanese people.
please.
Of course, no, Japan and US are very good friends. But one question: why didn't you tell US allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. When we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? He's asking me. No, you believe in surprise, I think, much more so than us. And we had to surprise him, and we did. And because of that surprise, we knocked out, the first 2 days, we probably knocked out 50% of what and much more than we anticipated doing. So if I go and tell everybody about it, there's no longer a surprise, right?
Yeah, so what y'all think about that? This man that talked about Pearl Harbor to these Japanese people. I mean, what y'all think? I got to know. I have got to know. Yeah, let me start this poll as to why y'all think this man didn't tell the allies about the war. He literally sat there and made that comment about how they should know about the element of surprise and why you didn't talk about Pearl Harbor and all of that, and it went dead silent. Okay, like uncomfortable moment. I'm thinking. We got Purple Penguin saying Trump is such a bellend. What is he on? I don't know. I'm clueless. Then we got Lou with some brain explosion, head explosions, and shots in the face. And then Bull Monkey saying he paused for a laugh. So I was able to, I saw this other video from a different angle. So you'll get to see the beautiful person that asked the question, and you can see like the face of the prime minister that's sitting there next to him. Okay. And yes, Purple Penguin, definitely dead silent. Okay.
Allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran. So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay, right? You know, he's asking me. Now you believe in surprise, I think much more so than us, and we had to surprise him, and we did. And because of that surprise, we knocked out, the first 2 days, we probably knocked out 50% of what we, and much more than we anticipated doing. So if I go and tell everybody about it, there's no longer a surprise, right? Okay, one more for the Prime Minister. Are you good for the Prime Minister?
Yes.
Go ahead, for the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Japan's DG Press. Japan's biggest concern is China. Now they are giving us export control and very harsh terms to criticize us. So will you plan to bring out relationship between Japan and China while you are there?
Well, I'll be going to China very quickly, but I think I'd really like to have the Prime Minister talk about China because I know they have a little bit of an edgy relationship, and I'd just like to know where it stands, how you're doing with China. So, please.
で、日本はいつも中国に対してオープンです。会話はオープンにしています。それから冷静に対応しています。で、とにかく米中関係も含めてですね、これが地域の安定、それから世界のサプライチェーン、これに貢献するものであることを願っています。日本は常にオープンです。
Okay, so we got to see kind of a little bit more of her reaction to this comment. Yeah, I mean, she's looking at the watch on her arm like, okay, it's time to go. My goodness. So yeah, that's what Trump did today. That's what he did. Okay. So we got Purple Penguin saying that woman looks uncomfortable. I believe she was. I really do. Lewis saying, Bull Monkey, you mean like the Running Man? The original, not the new remake. Okay. Then we got Purple Penguin saying, wow, he just won't let anyone talk. Of course not. So Bull Monkey is asking me, have you watched Idiocracy? I have not. I have not heard of that. I have not. And then Purple Penguin is saying, that poor woman. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. So speaking of travel, Trump's travel plans to China got delayed. He's going to put off his meeting with the leadership over there. And so I saw, first of all, we know that DHS is still under furlough, okay? They haven't gotten paid in like a couple pay periods. They're going on close to 40 days now, I think, give or take. So a lot of the TSA agents have been called out of work to the point where they have had to close some of these smaller airports because they have enough staff to do what need to be done. So I wanted us to kind of take a look at that real fast.
There is new fallout this afternoon from the partial government shutdown. Airports are scrambling to address staffing shortages, and travelers are left facing long lines in TSA. Here's ABC's Lionel Moise.
A new warning from the TSA. The partial government shutdown could soon force some small airports to close because of staffing shortages. More TSA officers being forced to work without pay are now calling out sick, including more than 30% in New Orleans, Atlanta, Houston, and New York. Some airports have been forced to close security checkpoints. Philadelphia's airport closing 2 more checkpoints today.
We're looking for bombs, guns, knives at the airport, making sure people are safe, and we shouldn't be stressed about how we're going to pay our bills.
It's been 31 days since we've received a full paycheck, and I would like to tell the American public that the call-offs that are occurring with TSA right now are not because we don't want to come to work because we're not getting paid. We're talking about parents who cannot afford childcare, and we're talking about officers who cannot put gas in their cars to make it to work.
It's all because of a standoff in Congress. Democrats are refusing to fund the Homeland Security Department until Republicans agree to changes in immigration enforcement. Democrats want to require immigration agents to get certain warrants before searches, and they want to ban agents from wearing masks to protect their identity. There has been movement in the negotiations. The Trump administration has now agreed to expand the use of body cameras, limit immigration enforcement in sensitive locations like schools and hospitals, and require agents who are not undercover to identify themselves. Democrats offer to fund the TSA and all agencies except for ICE and Border Patrol, but Republicans rejecting that idea. In addition to long lines at the airport, travelers have something else to worry about. Airfares are rising by up to 20% in the last week as the war in Iran drives up fuel prices. Lionel Moyes, ABC News.
Okay, y'all, so what y'all think about that? I have never seen where they had to close down checkpoints and potential airports due to not having TSA agents being paid. This is ridiculous. They need to be paid. Not just TSA. I understand that they have some concerns about some of the ICE agent tactics. But I mean, you're gonna hold everybody under DHS hostage, and I haven't heard of them, meeting lately to discuss options for getting it funded. But that needs to be funded right about now. What you guys think? So, Boom Monkey gave me homework. I have to watch Idiocracy. It is a comedy but mirrors the present administration well. I hope that's on Netflix. Then we have Purple Penguin saying, "Oh, I felt so bad for the TSA." Craig Cohen, welcome to the check-in, says, "Are the Democrats proud of this BS they're creating?" I do not know, sir. We have Galapagos DC, welcome to the check-in, saying Israel has gotten us to um POA over $9 trillion. $9 trillion? Oh my goodness. We got Zhang Kun, welcome to the check-in, saying we can do away with TSA. Bull Monkey says, don't forget the popcorn. And Purple Penguin confirms, yes, must watch that movie. And Zhao Kun saying, no, TSA was never a thing until 9/11. I remember that. Purple Penguin saying that TSA came in with the Patriot Act. Okay. Right. Okay. So we have discussed a lot tonight. We have talked about what has happened with the oil fields and the energy sector over in the Middle East. We've also talked about Operation Epic Fury. We touched on Markwayne Mullin's testimony, as well as Pam Bondi's briefing regarding Epstein. And we talked about Trump and his Pearl Harbor comments, amongst other things. So now we've had a jam-packed day. So what else do you guys have for me in the comments, honey? We have been on here for 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 47 seconds. We got Purple Penguin saying, welcome to Costco. I love you. What is Costco? What you mean, welcome to Costco? So we got Galapagos saying, if we cut our military budget in half and cut off foreign aid, we could fix our country. Okay. I'm all about something being fixed. That would be good. But yeah, y'all, so I am flying out tomorrow, heading to Alabama. My mom turned 81 today. It is her 81st birthday today, and I am going home to visit her and take her out to eat. I'm putting together a little family event where we can take her out to eat, you know, and celebrate her milestone because all of these birthdays are milestones. So I'm probably not going to be live on Monday, but next Tuesday for sure. If I do come on live before then, I'll post something on the community wall and everything and give you some notice. But I'll definitely be back for sure on Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern, because with all these gas prices and things going up, it made more sense for me to fly back on Monday night opposed to Sunday night. That's my original plan. Okay. So what we got here in the poll, I asked the Congress, go ahead and fund DHS. We got 57% that said yes, 43% said no. And then we have the other poll where I said, well, why didn't Trump tell his allies about the war? 67% said he forgot. 30% said element of surprise. 0% said he has it in the bag. Okay, so we got Christopher Morrow saying I'll be there. Boo Monkey says, Galapagos, you do know what foreign aid is, right? And so Purple Penguin says, where is the community wall? So if you go onto my page, you know what? Do I have power here? If you go into my YouTube page, there should be like a tab for like lives and shorts. And then there's one also for I want to say it says post. Let me try and go on there myself real fast before my phone, before my tablet really lose all the power that it has. Give me 1 second. But yeah, it's on there. I call it a community wall, but let me see if I can get to my page real quick. Cause yeah, I'm literally on living on the edge. I had my tablet charging, but it wasn't charging. Go figure. Okay, let's see. Let me type my name in here. Let me go here. So yeah, when you go on the YouTube page, okay. Let me go back here. So when you go onto the page, it looks like this, and you'll see the word community on, that's what it looks like on mine. It has community on here. And then you also have like the word posts on this line here, home, video, shorts, live, playlist, posts. So on the posts is where I will have things posted there. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, Christopher confirmed. It says post. I just clicked on it and it had updates. Yes. So we have Bull Monkey saying interest-free loans make up the majority of foreign aid. I didn't know that. They need to give me an interest-free loan. How about that? But anyway, y'all, I am going to go ahead and log off. But I enjoyed you guys. If you're catching the replay, please put a comment in the chat for me. I will see you guys next Tuesday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes. You all have a great night and a great weekend. I will see you guys soon. Bye.